Hey guys, it's Cam from Craft and Tailored, and in this week's episode of What Is On My Wrist, we are talking about a 1969 reference 1675. It's a GMT, but this one is in 18 karat yellow gold. What's really interesting about the GMTs and also gold GMTs is that most Rolex sport models always started in steel, and it was later that a gold offering was then brought into the product catalog. What's interesting about the GMT is that even back in the early part of the 50s, Rolex offered a yellow gold 6542 Bakelite GMT, and then moved into the 1675s, and then obviously the other models offering the GMT in gold, which is kind of interesting, I think, for a couple of different reasons. One, even though the GMT is a sports watch, I think that the cool thing is that the GMT also is kind of an executive level watch. If we think about Pan Am and kind of the jet age and the executives that were flying and stuff like that, I think it makes sense that the watch be produced in a much more noble metal than just in steel. And that's kind of an interesting little side facet of the GMT, is that the earliest versions of the GMT, being the reference 6542, were produced also in yellow gold alongside of steel, whereas it really wasn't until 1969 that Rolex offered a Submariner in yellow gold. So just kind of a fun little GMT factoid. But in any case, I wanted to take a minute to kind of highlight this example of a yellow gold reference 1675. This, I believe, is going to be our first yellow gold 1675 on the channel. It's not the first yellow gold GMT that we featured. We've got a couple of videos that talk about other yellow gold variants of the GMT, but this is the first yellow gold 1675, and this is a great example. So I wanted to take a minute to kind of highlight this one and talk a little bit about yellow gold GMTs in general. If you don't know already, Rolex actually introduced the GMT in 1954 with the reference 6542 as a result of a need that originated with Pan Am. They needed a watch that could be issued to their crews during long-haul international flights. So this is a really nice example, and I think that yellow gold Rolex sports watches have definitely seen an upwards trend in terms of desirability and also collectability. It makes sense that, obviously the steel variants, being that it was a sports watch, were much more readily available and obviously received a higher production number just due to them being a much more cost-effective option, but also due to the fact that they, for their intended use purpose, was, to be a sports watch and a tool. Obviously, yellow gold examples of sports watches within the Rolex range are desirable because of their, very small production numbers. So this is a really nice 1675 in 18 karat yellow gold, and wanted to draw some attention to this. Yellow gold GMTs and yellow gold brown dial, brown bezel GMTs sometimes have the nickname Concord or Concord GMT. And although this example, I wouldn't really classify it as a direct Concord, because the Concord example has some elements that make it specific to being the one that was most notable for being included in this ad that Rolex put together that basically said, if you were flying the Concord tomorrow, you'd wear a Rolex. And that watch is prominently known as the Concord. I can actually show you an example of a Concord. I've got a really great book in front of me that I've used over the years. Matter of fact, almost to the point where it's falling apart. I've lived in these books that I have in my collection. But essentially, this is the Mondani Rolex GMT Master book, which is really, really awesome. We have them in our shop, so I'll provide a link in the description below. And if you're not familiar with the Mondani references, they're great. Hi, Georgia. Hope you and the family are doing well. But this essentially would be what we would refer to as the Concord GMT. I will find this for you here. A Concord GMT essentially is a reference 1675, but what's interesting about the specific Concord GMTs, and I'm trying to find one here, they actually have president style hands. Similar to this is a 1675/8, but this is a very early underline version from 64 with no crown guards. Really interesting and kind of unique example. But the hands, instead of being your traditional sport style hands, they actually have a non-luminous sweep seconds hand, president style hands, and then either a small or a large GMT hand. This version from 1969 has the more traditional, Submariner style hands with a bigger luminous filled GMT hand and obviously a luminous filled sweep seconds hand. Although this isn't a true Concord, I guess you could say that it is, Concord-esque. The interesting thing about yellow gold sports watches is the condition can vary widely in them. Either they can be very nice like this example, and our expert opinion remains unpolished or maybe what we'd call sleeve polished, to very polished and kind of beaten up and worn out. The interesting thing about yellow gold as it pertains to watches is that it's a soft metal, so it is very malleable, meaning that it can ultimately bend and kind of move and soften, if that makes sense. So really nice oyster bracelet, which is kind of nice. Most often you'll see yellow gold GMTs on yellow gold Jubilees, which I actually think is nice, especially in yellow gold, but this one is on an oyster rivet bracelet, which is in very nice shape, if you can see that. So that is, pretty stacked there. And then additionally, the dial is flawless, the lume within the hands and on the nipple dial. I said nipple. The common name for a dial like this is nipple dial, but essentially this is kind of almost like the first version of a luminous filled plot that we see being offered from Rolex. So essentially we've got these little tiny markers, and then that are applied markers, and then those markers are then filled with, in this case, tritium luminous material. Really nice overall example. I like wearing yellow gold sports watches. Additionally, one of my favorite yellow gold sports watches to wear is actually the GMT, because the funny thing about yellow gold Submariners is that the reality is are you really gonna go scuba diving with your yellow gold 1680 or whatever? Probably not. But the fact that this watch, is a sports watch, I like the idea of wearing something like this and ultimately, being that jet setting kind of executive. Like, I can relate to that, whereas it's kind of hard for me to relate to like wearing an 18K yellow gold dive watch and actually diving with it. Overall condition of this piece is just absolutely stunning. The dial is, we could almost call it like a Stella type dial. It's a lacquered dial, so it's a glossy dial that is similar to like a gilt dial, but there is a printing on the dial. The coronet that is located underneath the 12 o'clock marker is in fact applied, which is nice, and very nice matching hands. The brown bezel insert is also really nice. It's in really nice condition. So overall feel finish of the watch is really nice. The thing that is interesting about yellow gold watches in general is that they tend to be a little bit heavier. Obviously gold is a heavy material, but this oyster rivet bracelet does add kind of like a lightness to it, and I think increases the wearability for me. So really nice watch when on the wrist. There's definitely a presence there, but it's something that is, ultimately wearable is what I would say. So really nice example. This one is available in our shop at the time of recording, so I'll provide a link in the description below and above so you guys can check that out. But just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about yellow gold 1675s and yellow gold sports watches from Rolex. And this was a really nice example, so figured it would be nice to showcase this in an episode of What Is On My Wrist. And as always, guys, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not doing so already, follow us on Instagram at Craft and Tailored. And if you've got watch questions, here and happy to help. Drop us a line, info@craftandtailored.com. I will see you guys in the next one.